The world held its breath. The United Nations Security Council, in a rare show of unity, called for an immediate ceasefire in Rafah. Israel, facing mounting international pressure, seemed poised to relent. Yet the ground told a different story. The rumble of tanks continued to echo through the streets of Rafah, punctuated by the chilling shriek of fighter jets overhead. Israel, it seemed, was determined to continue its assault, UNSC resolution notwithstanding. This defiance set the stage for a diplomatic firestorm, pitting Israel against a chorus of international condemnation. What began as a response to rocket fire from Gaza had transformed into a full-blown military incursion, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. The stakes were high, the situation volatile, and the outcome far from certain. The world watched and waited, hoping against hope that sanity would prevail, that the guns would fall silent. To understand the current crisis, one must delve into the annals of history, tracing the tangled threads of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The recent escalation, while shocking in its intensity, did not emerge in a vacuum. It was, rather, the culmination of years of simmering tensions, punctuated by sporadic eruptions of violence. The kidnapping and brutal murder of 3 Israeli teenagers in the occupied West Bank in June 2014 ignited the latest chapter in this seemingly endless saga. Israel accused Hamas of orchestrating the abduction and launched a massive crackdown in the West Bank, rounding up hundreds of Palestinians. Hamas, while denying involvement in the kidnapping, responded with rocket fire into Israel, triggering a cycle of retaliatory strikes and counterstrikes. The situation on the ground deteriorated rapidly, with each side blaming the other for the escalating violence. Lost in the geopolitical calculations and diplomatic wrangling were the human stories, the individual tragedies that lay at the heart of the conflict. In the rubble-strewn streets of Rafah, amidst the stench of death and the cries of the wounded, the true cost of war was etched on the faces of ordinary people. Families huddled in fear, their homes reduced to rubble. Children, their innocence shattered by the horrors they had witnessed, bore the psychological scars of a conflict they could scarcely comprehend. One woman, her voice trembling with emotion, recounted the harrowing tale of her family's desperate flight from their home as bombs rained down around them. "We lost everything, our home, our belongings, everything." Thousands of Palestinians, their lives upended by the fighting, were forced to flee their homes, seeking refuge in UN-run schools and makeshift shelters. As the crisis in Gaza deepened, the international community found itself grappling with how to respond to the escalating violence. Reactions ranged from condemnation to cautious calls for restraint, reflecting the complex geopolitical realities and the deep divisions that have long plagued the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The United States, Israel's staunchest ally, found itself in a particularly delicate position. While reiterating its unwavering support for Israel's right to defend itself, the Obama administration also expressed concern over the mounting civilian casualties in Gaza. The European Union, meanwhile, adopted a more critical tone, condemning the Israeli offensive as disproportionate and urging both sides to agree to an immediate ceasefire. The Arab world, outraged by the bloodshed in Gaza, demanded an end to the Israeli blockade and called for international action to protect Palestinian civilians. The crisis in Gaza served as a stark reminder of the volatile and interconnected nature of the Middle East. As the dust settled on the latest round of fighting, the international community was left to ponder the future of Gaza and the prospects for a lasting peace between Israelis and Palestinians. The situation remained precarious, the underlying issues unresolved. One potential path forward, advocated by many in the international community, involved a two-state solution, with Israel and an independent Palestinian state coexisting peacefully side by side. However, this long-held aspiration seemed increasingly elusive, hampered by years of mistrust, failed negotiations, and the expansion of Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank. Another scenario envisaged a continuation of the status quo, with Gaza remaining under Israeli blockade and the West Bank subject to Israeli military occupation. The future of Gaza, and indeed the entire region, remained uncertain, a Gordian knot of political, historical, and humanitarian complexities that defied easy solutions. Beyond the political complexities and the blame game lay a humanitarian catastrophe of immense proportions. The Gaza Strip, already reeling from years of Israeli blockade, was now grappling with the devastating consequences of a full-scale military offensive. Hospitals, overwhelmed with casualties, struggled to cope with the influx of wounded, their resources stretched to the breaking point. The relentless bombardment had crippled Gaza's infrastructure, leaving millions without access to basic necessities like water, electricity, and sanitation. The humanitarian situation in Gaza served as a stark reminder of the human cost of the conflict, a cost borne not by politicians or military strategists, but by ordinary people. The United States, as Israel's closest ally and a global superpower, has long played a pivotal role in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. However, its role in the latest crisis has been the subject of much scrutiny and debate. Critics accuse the Obama administration of being slow to condemn the Israeli offensive and of providing tacit support for Israel's actions. They argued that the U.S., by blocking international efforts to censure Israel, was effectively giving Israel a free pass to continue its military operations. Supporters of the U.S. position countered that America was simply upholding its commitment to Israel's security, and that it was working behind the scenes to broker a ceasefire. The debate over the U.S. role in the crisis reflected the deep divisions within American society over the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Echoes of history. The Israel-Palestine conflict. The conflict between Israel and the Palestinians is not a recent phenomenon. It is a decades-old struggle with deep historical roots, a tangled web of competing narratives, grievances, and aspirations. The conflict can be traced back to the early 20th century with the rise of Zionism, a movement advocating for the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine, then under Ottoman rule. The Balfour Declaration of 1917, in which the British government expressed support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine, further fueled Zionist aspirations and exacerbated tensions with the indigenous Arab population. The 1948 Arab-Israeli War, which resulted in the creation of the State of Israel and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, deepened the conflict and sowed the seeds of future animosity. Understanding this historical context is crucial to comprehending the current crisis in Gaza. Beyond the headlines. Understanding the complexities. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is often portrayed in simplistic terms, a binary struggle between good and evil, right and wrong. However, the reality is far more nuanced and complex. Both sides harbor legitimate grievances and aspirations. Both have experienced suffering and loss. To truly understand the conflict, one must move beyond the headlines and delve into the historical, political, and social complexities that underpin it. It is a conflict fueled by competing narratives, historical injustices, and a profound lack of trust. The quest for justice, a long and arduous road. At the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict lies a fundamental question of justice. For Palestinians, justice means an end to the Israeli occupation, the establishment of an independent Palestinian state, and the right of return for refugees displaced by decades of conflict. For Israelis, justice means recognition of their right to exist in peace and security, free from the threat of terrorism and violence. Reconciling these competing visions of justice is perhaps the greatest challenge facing any attempt to resolve the conflict. It requires empathy, understanding, and a willingness to acknowledge the pain and suffering endured by both sides. It also requires a commitment to dialogue, compromise, and a shared vision of a future where both Israelis and Palestinians can live in peace, dignity, and security. a glimmer of hope, prospects for a lasting peace. Despite the seemingly intractable nature of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, glimmers of hope do exist. Amidst the violence and despair, there are individuals and organizations on both sides, working tirelessly to build bridges of understanding and promote a peaceful resolution. Grassroots peace initiatives, often led by women and young people, offer a ray of hope in an otherwise bleak landscape. These initiatives, while operating on a small scale, demonstrate the yearning for peace that exists among ordinary Israelis and Palestinians. They provide a platform for dialogue, challenge stereotypes, and foster empathy and understanding. The road to peace may be long and arduous, but it is a journey that must be taken for the sake of future generations, both Israeli and Palestinian, who deserve to inherit a land free from conflict and bloodshed.